Welcome back. I hope you're enjoying your Monday, even though you're probably back at your job if you have one, or you're locked down, don't know when you're going to go back. By the way, apparently Andrew Cuomo is hinting that he thinks that the lockdown has to end before the vaccine reaches, I guess, herd immunity levels. So much for that excuse. And think about how auspicious the date is. In any case, I wanted to tell you that the alt tech future is really it's something that we are having to confront much faster than people were ready. And I think I'm going to say that because there are there are plenty of people who are still, and I won't exclude myself, but there's still people who are active on Facebook and they think that I just put stuff that's very benign. There's no reason that they're going to come after me. I just comment on stuff. I just say, look, it is time to start downgrading your activity on all those platforms. I started doing it a long time ago, and I am going to focus a little bit more, I think, in the next couple days on talking to you. I'm probably going to do a live stream, but talking to you about really how censorship has gotten to this point and where we can start looking in order to really break the blockade. And that's something that is not going to be easy. And unfortunately, I think that there's going to be real life consequences for a lot of people who are going to be active in this very necessary effort to make sure that people don't have to live on pins and needles all day, basically agree with a single view on the world. And that's something that's important to me. So, for your information, I am putting together a guide, an alt tech guide that I think will help people who are the uninitiated really get into some of these websites. I don't know yet where I'm going to try to publish it. I'm not, because first of all, it might not be a place. It might not be something that this publication will want to publish. Nobody wants to have the bullseye on their back. But I can tell you that people are already bolting from Facebook. They're bolting from WhatsApp. And they're leaving Twitter especially. And unfortunately, there's been many fallen soldiers, if I can put it that way, as a metaphor, entirely a metaphor on this front. And one of the reasons for that is the Parler debacle. Now, I was using Parler, and I was using it largely to echo posts of people that I found interesting. But the reality is that I don't think the Parler was necessarily the most useful social media platform. So, to be clear, I want you, before we keep going, to take a look through some of the, sorry, this is an article, but take a look through some of the social media and video hosting websites where I'm active. BitChute is the one that's growing the fastest, in my opinion, at least from my perspective. The other ones are Odyssey, which I personally, for a long time, I thought was more useful, but it's not. I think BitChute is really caught up to it. But I would say subscribe to both of them, because you don't know which one is going to be hit with some harsh measures, even though, as I'll try to explain a little later, BitChute has apparently, they've weathered a lot of attempts to take them down in the past, and they may be more difficult than any of the sites to take down. I don't know much about Odyssey in terms of that. And then you also have Rumble, which I personally don't find easy to use as a creator, but which was experiencing a ton of growth for a very long time. And even Reuters is on Rumble. So my question is, if you have alternative tech, and I think some have said that Rumble doesn't necessarily count as alt tech, but let's include them for the sake of argument. If you have Reuters, the most important news agency in the world in terms of wire services, in terms of, there used to be, obviously the Associated Press still exists, but Reuters, I think, is the most well-established one. And they're posting on alt tech on Rumble. And they're also, by the way, Reuters, for those of you that don't know, is even posting on BitChute. Well, isn't that an indication that alt tech is not just for the crazies? It's not just for crackpots. It's not just for fringe religious zealots. It's not just for, some of these alt-right people. It is for people who are looking for an alternative to mainstream media, whether it's on TV, whether it's on YouTube, and YouTube has pushed them away. So, to be clear here, I am not expecting, unfortunately, for the big tech companies to come to their senses and say, what are we doing here? We're basically saying to a massive portion of our user base that they're not welcome, that they might as well not be connected to the new communication front of the future, and that they can go somewhere else. And then when they go somewhere else, we're going to crack down on them and attempt to make them pay for it. And in some cases, share their data with other people and also run them out of business. So what's the meaning of all that? In my opinion, some of these measures will have a long-lasting effect, and they're irreversible. There are people, many people, whose lives are going to be ruined by the Parler debacle. It says here, so the Parler shutdown may not kill the controversial social media platform. So, for those of you that don't know, Parler was formed, I think, in 2018. And the main vehicle for Parler were a lot of people who I would say were not quite mainstream conservatives, but also were not necessarily the edgy type. So people like Mark Levin, people like ultimately Dan Bongino, Candace Owens, and they all decided that they want basically an alternative to Twitter. And the real problem that I saw from the beginning was that making an alternative to Twitter is really not a lofty goal. Twitter is an awful social media platform. It actually brings out the most reflexive and ugly elements of human behavior, in my opinion. And it does that because you sense that you're destroying someone else sometimes when you're on Twitter, and not just on Twitter, but on other social media. But it all feels like it's just fun. But the reality is that Twitter is really where cancel culture got its it got its perfection. And one of the reasons is that it's very easy to share a rumor when it's limited to 150 characters, I believe was how it used to be. I think Twitter sort of expanded it. And the reality is that Twitter quickly established itself as one of the most vicious avenues to communicate online that exist today. And I think that it's going to see basically its business model start to collapse because, yes, there's definitely people who are always going to be hungry to go after one another. I'm not innocent of it myself. I've also trolled people. I've now not usually on Twitter, by the way. And my activity on Twitter was largely limited for about 2 years to sharing some of my content that I was producing on YouTube, sharing some of my articles when I was writing articles. And then I got banned on Twitter for insulting a person who, he would be considered conspiracy theorist by most people and is what I would define as a hoax journalist. So my banning from Twitter was largely painless for me. It wasn't a place where I was growing. And in fact, I didn't find it gratifying to be on Twitter because you weren't really meeting people who were necessarily, the best conversation partners, if I can put it that way. And I think that as the years have gone by and as politics has become entwined with Twitter and celebrity culture even more so is still entwined with Twitter, we've seen just how disastrous it can become. And I think it was a mistake on Donald Trump's part to depend on Twitter, but the dependency worked both ways, right? The reason that so many people started to open Twitter accounts and tweet constantly is because they wanted to live and feast off of the click bounty that was Donald Trump and everything associated with who he was. And not just Donald Trump, but there were other politicians, Bernie Sanders, There were other politicians that people despised, like Hillary Clinton, who were a top. Let's not pretend that the viciousness was directed in one way. But once Donald Trump was elected president, the main focus of the platform shifted to him, and therefore a lot of the more ridiculous and sensational behavior was centered around him, not around any of these other people. And the mistake that many people made was thinking that when you put your opinion out there on Twitter, that you're making the public conversation richer. And that's not the case. Unfortunately, there were people, just for example, I believe there was a pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, and I forget his name at the moment, but he had posted years ago. This is not even a political issue. He posted some rap lyrics that had explicit language. I think it even had a racial slur in it, racial slur that I can't say on YouTube, and that I don't even say it anyway. So, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. It was a rap. It was some rap lyrics, and he basically it surfaced years later when he was at the All-Star game. And the reason that it surfaced was that he had become basically this overnight sensation. And luckily, there was a journalist who decided, well, I'm going to go through this man's Twitter history and basically find something that we can use in order to show us who the real guy is. And then we're going to get him canceled. And that's exactly what happened. And it happened to him. It happened to Dante DiVincenzo, so this college basketball player for Villanova. It happened to a student who raised, I believe, over $1 million for cancer research at the University of Iowa. So a person who his entire reason for being famous, it was literally for raising money for a good cause. Basically, he was defamed for tweets that he had made in the past that were a little bit off color. That's really what Twitter became about in terms of the media and in terms of how they treat people who they think can be used in order to amplify the profile of themselves, right? The Twitter is basically a giant ladder that spans the entire world, right? And there's multiple different loops on the ladder. And in order to really succeed using Twitter, you have to climb over the person in front of you and shove him down. That's the way that you should look at Twitter. So, to be fair, I think it was a useful tool for many years. There were many people who, there were journalists who used it. It was a way for different information to come out. I know that WikiLeaks was using Twitter. I believe they still use WikiLeaks, by the way. So WikiLeaks was using Twitter in order to drop a lot of their notifications. And that was, I would say, one of the better benefits of having it. Now, Parler, what they will have to go through in order to survive this is not easy, and they know it's not easy. And one of the really serious problems is that their website security apparently was not the greatest. Now, I was on Parler. I did not have messaging capability anyway, because I think you have to be verified in order to do messaging capability. I don't feel that what I had on Parler would lead to me having any professional consequences, because it was such a major downloadable app. It was the number one app in the USA when it was banned from the App Store. So it was so well used in order for people to communicate, that I don't feel personally that anything that I have on Parler will be used against me professionally. But I could be wrong, and I think you could also see some repercussions. We don't know what the ramifications of it will be, but I made pains, first of all, not to post. I don't post personal stuff on almost any of my social media, and I also try to keep my jobs away from social media. In fact, on LinkedIn, I don't update my job position. And on Facebook, I've never in my life mentioned where I work, until at least not since I think 2011 or so. So those are issues that I think people are going to have to cope with as they go forward, that your public life is basically something that is just an instrument to bludgeon you from now on. There's no reason to post any sort of personal information, whether it's professional or your family or where you eat on for social media, unless, remember, unless you think that your lifestyle and your beliefs and the things that you say and the clothes that you wear and I guess even your skin tone conform to the ideals and beliefs of these social media companies, right? It's just a very draconian situation at the moment. So what do I think is going to be the path forward? The first thing I think people ought to do is decide how active am I really, do I really need to be on social media? Is what I am commenting on and are my comments really going to help me to address the issue that's being discussed and also add to the conversation, right? And I think comment boards were a great way for people to do that for many, many years. But we don't know I mean, first of all, a lot of them are gone. So unfortunately, we don't have the same ability to directly comment on the news as before. But if you think that that's something essential, that you want to comment on news stories, I want to say this, and it might surprise you, Gab might be the place to join. And I get it that the people who are on Gab are not necessarily the type that you would hang out with. I think many of them are, there's just they're just not pleasant people. Not no other way to put it. But you get over it really fast, and they don't really interact with you anyway. There's very little harassment on Gab, and I've been on that platform for 3 to 4 years. And the people who do go after you on Gab, typically, I mean, it's just very easy to mute or block them or whatever. You just mind your own business, and generally people will mind their own business. And that's really one of the things that, for all of the issues that I might have with the beliefs of the founder of Gab, I don't really agree with him on a lot of ideas. I think that he's made it a good platform, and I think he's not really somebody that I think is willing to bend yet on any of his core beliefs as far as freedom of speech. And in fact, he's actually seeing a spike in Gab activity now, and I mean, you can actually see here. So if you look at even the aggregated news, so today USA Today has to put out a story, right, in response to what happened with Parler. Gab has shot up. Okay, as Apple and Google crack down on social media app Parler, conservatives appear to be flocking to another app that claims to, quote, champion free speech. Gab first launched in 2016 and has remained online despite efforts to shut it down in 2018 after it was discovered the suspected gunman in the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting that killed 11 people posted on the platform. Now, as Andrew Torba is very quick to mention, Gab almost always cooperates directly with law enforcement. And when they don't, I believe it's usually because they're not able to in time. But he sends out notices, and you can get them by email, where he tells people, he issues formal press releases. He says to the media and he says to the audience that we have this policy on Gab where illegal activity, we take it seriously and we don't hide it, and we cooperate with law enforcement. And that's why I think it's actually, ironically, safer than Facebook, because there's many scams on Facebook. There's many different, weird things that are for sale on Facebook through Marketplace and things like that. You don't see that on Gab. Amazon Web Services suspended Parler from its web hosting at midnight Sunday. Amazon cited Parler posts that encourage and incite violence for pulling hosting services. So what is Gab? Here's what you should know. Gab was launched as an alternative to traditional platforms such as Twitter and Facebook. During that time, Twitter had suspended several accounts associated with the, quote, alt-right movement on the same day it vowed a crackdown on hate speech. The suspensions pushed many people to Gab, which has fewer content restrictions compared to Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms. And then it says, we believe that the future of online publishing is decentralized and open, reads a description on its website. We believe that users of social networks should be able to control their social media experience on their own terms rather than the terms set down by big tech. Like Parler, users turned to Gab in part due to concerns larger platforms like Twitter were censoring conservative opinions. However, the relaxed rules opened the door for content such as conspiracy theories and misinformation. In August 2018, Microsoft had threatened to drop web hosting for Gab over 2 anti-Semitic posts, which were since removed, reported The Verge. And then there was the Pittsburgh shooting that happened later that year. It goes through that. I'm not going to read that because it mentions the killer's name. And, that's usually how you glorify these people. Efforts to shut Gab down. PayPal confirmed in 2018 it had canceled Gab's account following the shooting. In November, Gab was briefly knocked offline after providers pulled their services, but Gab was able to quickly find a new service provider. We are back online, said Gab in a tweet after the site returned online. We grow stronger by the hour. Since the crackdown on Parler, Gab says it's seen a surge in users, saying it saw 40 million visits this week and more users in the past 2 days than we did in our first 2 years of existing. The service has also shown sympathy for Parler amid the suspensions. We went through this ourselves years ago. It's not fun, wrote Gab on its Twitter feed. Here's to hoping they can figure something out. It won't be easy, but it can be done, and Gab is proof of that. So I do know that Andrew Torba was not a fan of Parler, but I do appreciate that he at least said, yeah, Parler can get through it. I think it's going to be more difficult for Parler, but I do believe that Parler can come back, and more than that, I think that you should go on Gab anyway. I think that whatever you think you thought of Parler, I thought that Gab was the superior site, and there is something on Parler that you should know about that I think makes it basically one of the best sites to use. It's called the Dissenter plugin, and that means that even though the websites that you have become used to using no longer, I'm talking about news websites, whether it's Al Jazeera or the New York Times or whatever, you either can't comment or you have to pay in order to comment. You have to be a premium member in order to comment. So Gab has decided, well, we're just going to give every single page on the internet its own comment section, and it will be stored by Gab. And that's what it's been doing. And it's actually great. So all I can say is that I would recommend that you use it, and I recommend that you at least give it a try. Now, where does this leave the future of big tech? I can tell you that as a user of YouTube, as a creator on YouTube, not really a successful creator on YouTube, but one nevertheless, I think that this time was long coming, and I think that people got arrogant during the Trump administration, and they thought, well, the worst that can happen is that we'll end up finding a different streaming service, we'll find a different video hosting service, and things won't be as tight over there. It won't be as difficult, and there won't be the demonetization issue. And what they forgot was that, the big tech companies, they work together, right? And the CEOs of these big tech companies, they likely have each other, at least whether it's either they have each other's phone numbers or they talk to each other through their stooges, their lawyers or whoever. The real issue is that they have consciously collaborated here in order to push Parler off, because Parler is a competitor for at least one of them, which is Twitter, and also to some extent Facebook. So they saw the threat and they identified the threat and they took it out in Parler's case. In the case of video hosting platforms, so as of yet, there is no platform that is as versatile and user-friendly as YouTube. And it's going to be very long until something like that happens, because unfortunately, the best one, which I mentioned before, BitChute, it is getting more functional in terms of its usability online, but the phone app is not available for Apple, and on Android I think you have to go through some alternative app download website in order to use it. There is a way to download an app for Gab on your phone, and I never understood how to do it, so I never did. But the bottom line is that your use of social media platforms on your mobile device, which people use during the day because they don't have time to just sit on their desktop all day like other people do, it's a very limiting factor if there is no mobile app. But the fact is that I think that eventually BitChute will probably take a large share out of YouTube's traffic, and I think that there's many things that are standing in the way. One thing that I think is a problem is that too much of the content on BitChute is political, whereas if you go on YouTube, you can still find videos that are more lifestyle things. They could be, for example, how-to videos for installing a screen door, or doing things like playing a cover song. There's a lot of music videos from the artists themselves, right through Vivo or through other. Warner Music has a presence on YouTube. So for the things that people do that have nothing to do with their beliefs and what they talk about in terms of the world, YouTube is still the go-to place. I don't know how that stops being the case, right? I think for gamers, it's going to be a little bit less user-friendly. That's why some people have started moving to Twitch, right? And gaming on YouTube has become sort of, I think that they went that way for a little while, and then they decided, well, we're just not going to be a hospitable place for gamers. And I think YouTube is lost because of it. I think that and this is not, it's not a topic that's dear to my heart. I don't really play video games, but when you start to turn away people who are using the platform for entertainment purposes purely, and you do it because maybe they have political beliefs that are other than yours or whatever, the gaming community is a very bad community to mess with, right? Because these are people that they're very passionate, and they also have a lot of time on their hands. So you're throwing away money basically in order to make a point about something that doesn't really have anything to do with gaming, right? If people use the N-word during gaming, if people use other like very off-color slurs while gaming, it might not be a socially acceptable thing in your mind. It might be something that you don't want your children to watch, and it might be something that you find is more beholden to a barbaric culture, but it is endemic in gaming, right? Right? People getting mad while they're playing a video game, or talking trash to other people. It's something that is one of the most central things of gaming, that you taunt the other person, things like that. So interfering with the culture of gaming is really a problem, and that's something that I think is going to have to be it's going to have to be addressed eventually, right? So this is something that happened with the NBA, and I think that social media, and more importantly, YouTube and entertainment, is going the way of the NBA. At least those that are not paying attention to the way society is going, right? They can think that the political reality that we're living in, where Joe Biden is going to be president, that will shield them from the ramifications, right? But it won't, because the fact is that, yes, the election is over, and some of the country has moved on, other parts of the country have not moved on, and you do see this deep division in the country. And yeah, people would like to watch maybe a basketball game, maybe watch some hockey or something. The fact is that when Christmas Day NBA ratings are down on a year that there's a lockdown, it is proof that people are not really interested in the NBA, because the NBA has gone into political messaging. It's gone into a lot of racial issues, and the audience is just falling apart, in my opinion. It says here, NBA ratings took another hit on Christmas Day when under 4 million people turned on the Lakers versus Mavericks game. So the Lakers, who are the flagship team in the NBA at this point. Sorry, Celtics fans, those of you that are Knicks fans especially, and you can't say Knicks fans without laughing. NBA Christmas ratings were off 21% from last year. NFL dunked on NBA head-to-head, nearly quadrupling the NBA audience. Outkick's Clay Travis tweeted about the ratings that day. By the way, I listen to Clay Travis at least a couple times a week. To be fair, the NBA had more viewers in communist China, however. The Lakers versus Maverick, and this is something he throws in from time to time. Clay Travis, definitely a person who fights about the issue of Chinese influence on American media. So it says the Lakers versus Mavericks game pulled in an average of 3.959 million viewers. Last year, the primetime NBA game between the Lakers and Clippers averaged just under 7 million views. The NBA has been seen, so people are going to say, well, maybe it's because of the matchup, right? Because there's less fans in Dallas than in LA. Look, the bottom line is that there's less. It doesn't even matter why, right? So if there's less people watching, then what does it matter whether it's the matchup? What does it matter whether it is the the quality of the player, whatever? The reason that it matters is that it's less. The NBA has been sinking ratings this year, and a piece on Outkick laid blame on NBA Commissioner Adam Silver and the league's business dealings with China, adding that the people of Hong Kong and former Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey deserve an apology. When the NBA decided that appeasing Chinese leaders to protect TV deals and jersey sales was more important than standing up for human rights, they didn't consider the long-term damage when they returned home. Now Adam Silver is making adjustments like moving the NBA's launch to Christmas Day, which now we know didn't help. Silver will play dumb or make excuses and say young people are, quote, pulling the plug on cable. But reality is that the NBA showed they care more about money than human rights, a mistake that can't be fixed without an apology. So that was this year, okay? This Christmas Day debacle for the NBA was this year. And it has nothing, look, I get it that some people want to say, oh, it's only Trump supporters that are turning. It's not only Trump supporters. I think people are done with a lot of these inflated entertainment models like the NBA. I still watch the NFL some weeks, and I've been watching the playoffs, but there's less people that are watching it too. So, yes, I think that this is really the problem with the politicization of life. And why am I mentioning this? You might be asking, what does the NBA have to do with Twitter? Well, Twitter is setting itself up to do the same thing to itself. And you can actually see this. I put it right behind here, but Twitter loses $5 billion in market value after Trump is permanently barred from the platform. So that was that was at the beginning of the day, I believe. Twitter's stock price tumbled as much as 12% on Monday, erasing $5 billion from its market capitalization. Now it did recover a little bit, but I believe that they ended up losing 6% at the end. And I can tell you that if you start to see people not just getting banned from Twitter, which already means that it's a smaller audience, right? Once you have a smaller audience, you have less customers and less of a reach, as they say in basic economics. So the issue for Twitter is that you already are throwing people away. You're throwing, first of all, the followers of one of the most popular Twitter accounts in history. I think Donald Trump's Twitter account is it trails only a few other people. I think one of the other people is Kanye West, maybe who else am I thinking of? I think Beyonce might have more Twitter followers. But the bottom line is that first of all, there's going to be more people, and there are more people who are already voluntarily leaving Twitter. There's apparently plenty of people from Fox News, which I'm surprised to hear, who are saying, well, Twitter is on the cusp of basically banning us, so we're just going to voluntarily leave. And once that happens, once you see people who they were using Twitter as their window to the world, also basically it's like a sign-in book for your thoughts of the day. Once you no longer use Twitter for that, well, in order for people to reach you, and you're a member of the media, you might be on TV, you might be a person who is, like Rush Limbaugh, who is, he's on radio all the time, or Mark Levin. So once people can't find you on Twitter, even if they hate you, they want to go and look for you. So if they open an account on a different social media platform, then you're going to see a lot of these Twitter haters migrate to that platform just in order to spite the person that they were attacking up until now. And that would have been Parler, and there were many people who started posting on Parler just to troll. That might be Gab, although I don't think trolling on Gab is particularly effective. It might be on Minds. It might be. I don't think it's going to get to the point where people are going to start using 4chan on a societal level. But the bottom line here is that the Twitter has given people a reason to look at other social media companies in order to use as communication platforms, right? And the other thing that I wanted to mention, speaking about haters, is that the people who are left on Twitter who were haters of Donald Trump, the people like the Krasensteins, the people like, Dr. Eugene Gu, if you know who those are, right? Eugene Gu is a guy who he's a doctor, and he's on Twitter all the time, and every single tweet about him is about Donald Trump, right? So this is a guy who he doesn't really have a reason to be on Twitter anymore, and nobody has a reason to follow him because the main reason that people were following him is largely gone from Twitter and is probably not going to be as much of an issue going forward, right? So he's not going to disappear entirely, but Donald Trump is going to be less of a topic on Twitter because he's not going to be on Twitter. One of the reasons he was such a big part of it was because he was literally one of the biggest users and one of the most followed people on it. So another issue that you're going to have to deal with is that the haters on Twitter who are looking to hate on Twitter are going to have to turn on someone else. And once that happens, they are going to go after people who are more mainstream. People like, I would say more mainstream and liberal. People like Paul Krugman, maybe members of the Biden cabinet. Like I forget the name of the guy who was just nominated today to be the head of the CIA. But there's going to be a lot of trolling on Twitter by left wingers of Biden, Biden cabinet members, because you're going to see mainly the conservative component of Twitter is going to be missing, right? It's going to be literally an echo chamber. And if you know something about the right-wing echo chambers that are existent, places like Minds.com, which has some left-wing people, but not that many. Places like Gab, which I don't think have any, I haven't seen almost any left-wing people on Gab. Within the echo chamber, people turn on each other too. This was happening a lot on Parler. This was happening a lot on, on BitChute even. But the fact is that when you have people that are aggressive and they're angry and they want to attack something, you will not see that behavior change just because one target of their aggression is gone. Meaning they're not going to just say, oh, Donald Trump is off of Twitter. I think I'm just going to post about, how nice of a garden I have or how I put up this hammock there or something. No, these are people who have a deeply visceral need to attack other people and just destroy and, just be antisocial in that way, right? And these are elements that I think are present in each and every one of us. I think that that's one of the reasons that people use the internet in order to take out that aggression. But I'm talking about Twitter users that are unusually active. People who spend, people like what's his name, Hassan Piker, and Anna Kasparian, and the Gravel Institute, if you know who they are, Brianna Joy Gray, and those people. And I respect their opinions. I don't respect their opinions. Let me be that. But I respect, unlike them, their right to put their opinion forward, even though I think that they're ridiculous and beneath my, my level of really acknowledging them as any sort of real thinkers, right? Because I think that they spend so much of their time on Twitter that they obviously could be using it to create somewhere else. But in any case, those people have an actual problem that Twitter is only making worse. And all the time that Donald Trump spent on Twitter basically trolling them, they're not going to get over it. It is basically baked into their personality at this point. They need red meat. They need to go after someone. They're going to, like, they could continue to complain about Republicans on Twitter, but in many cases, they won't be able to interact with those Republicans because those Republican Twitter accounts are going to be inactive, right? So they're going to be basically beating a dead horse. So who are they going to turn on? They're going to turn on other left wingers. They're going to turn on Democrats. They're going to turn. In some cases, you see some of these Twitter persecutors, I'm talking about users that persecute, they're going to turn on each other for racial reasons. And you've already seen it. There's a lot of Twitter users, for example, who are part of some of these minority groups. And what do? They attack other minority groups. You see black Twitter users attacking Hispanic ones, and vice versa. You see, Muslim users and Jewish users going after each other for various reasons. And that's really what's going to be left on Twitter. And what I believe is going to be the case is that in the near future, people are going to realize that it wasn't Donald Trump that made Twitter as toxic as it is today, right? He helped, but it wasn't him. It was everyone. It was the celebrities. It was the ideologues. It was the trolls. And it was the corporate enablers. So yeah, I believe that Twitter is in trouble. I don't know what it's going to do. I don't wish them the best because I was banned on Twitter and I don't miss it. But, I think that this has to happen. And, we'll see exactly what Jack Dorsey does. Probably one of the most diabolical people left in American media. So I think with that, I will conclude talking about YouTube. They have seen Google ad sales. This was in July of 2020. Google search sales fall nearly 10% from ad revenue. So the same thing that's happened to Twitter is going to happen with YouTube to some extent. YouTube is a little bit different of an issue because, of course, it's videos. But yes, you are going to see YouTube see a major contraction, and they're largely going the way of Netflix. They're going to streamed content. They're going to, basically become just another one of these, places where you go for produced content or for music videos that are officially released through record companies. The exact opposite of what YouTube was meant to be. YouTube was meant to be, before it was bought by Google and Alphabet, it was meant to be a place for creators, for young musicians, for young, comedians and pranksters and things like that. That is going away. I don't think that it'll happen. I don't think that's going to continue to have those people. Those people are going to migrate somewhere else to where I don't know. But that's about it. Once again, I want to remind you to subscribe to me on BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble. I also want to let you know that I am no longer going to be publishing using MailChimp. This is something that I've decided I'm going to basically go and take my own personal steps. So MailChimp was a great service, but they do often deplatform people when they're pursued by the media. They did it to Dan Bongino, and I believe they did it to some local Tea Party group. So you can now find me on Substack, and the link is below. So please enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk later, and I just wish you the best.